Hmm. Good morning, my friends. We're under a mask mandate in Utah County. So unfortunately for the government, they declined to specify what kind of mask I have to wear. So I chose. This is my pick. It's impossible to breathe in and terrible to see out of, but it's frickin' cool. So I went with it. Hi guys, it's really me. It's just me. Don't be freaked out. Let's see. Morning, Blake. Every time I log on to this thing, they change the system. Let's see if I can even figure out how this works today. Morning, Katie. It says Morgan, but it isn't Morgan. Unless Morgan all of a sudden is like 3 years older than Morgan is. At least I think. I don't know. I'm not actually sure how old Morgan is. But I'm pretty sure that whenever she gets to whatever that age that is, she's not going to look like that.
Probably not. She's 13.
Ah, that looks more like the face that I expect to go with that name. Let's see. How do we do this? Total non-video participants. Okay, cool. Well, that's why. People bouncing in and out. I'll be curious. If everybody shows up, I'll be hosting the largest Zoom meeting I've ever attended. So I'll be really interested to see if that actually works. It's supposed to. It should work. Actually, I'm going to change my network here. So give me a second. I may bounce in and out. There's the wolves. You got a knife. Yeah, I thought that's what that was, Blake. That's a pretty wicked looking. Yeah, that's a pretty wicked looking knife. Where did I put that? Ah. Do you ever put something in a place that's really super obvious, special place, so you will never forget where you put the thing, and then you forget where you put the thing? Does that ever happen to you, or is that just me?
It's happened to me before. I was like, "Where's my knife?" And then I was like, and then Mom pointed it out. It was right on top of the egg box.
Yeah. Minimize, pop out. Ooh, yeah, there we go. Pop the chat out there and drag that over here and blow it up. Oh, that's good. That's much better. So I can keep an eye on the chat. Push that over there. This over here where I can see everybody's lovely faces. Oh yeah, this is gonna be good. This is gonna be good. 2 wolves have joined us. Excellent. 7 non-video participants. What is this with non-video participants? There's another pack of Jensen's. Evan, there we go. Cool. Very nice. Except that now it tells me McKenna Jensen is waiting to join, which seems a little weird because I was pretty sure she was already here. There is weird stuff going on at the Jensen home today.
Well, when we did online seminary, and Morgan would get on and I'd get on, and she I was logged into Zoom, so like there were 2 me's or 2 hers or whatever, and on top of that I was like troubleshooting technology, so I was like going in and out of each screen. So that was really funny.
It's okay with me. Can't have too much McKenna. I don't know, maybe you can. I've never had too much McKenna. For other people, maybe a little bit may go, hey, here's some more McKenna trying to get in. That's great. Up to 17 participants, that's good. Perfectly okay. Do your video however you decide you want to do your video. That looks more like Adrian than it looks like McKenna. And I have a thing here that I have been meaning. I don't know why I can't. Well, I do know why I can't. It's quite possible that I have what you might call too much stuff to do. But I have an email here for Adrian that I keep meaning to send to Adrian, and I keep not sending to Adrian. So I'll probably just tell you. But Adrian is outside the suggested age for this class. However, due to intervention by powers who wish to remain anonymous, Adrian has been granted the very first Valentine Wiggins Scholarship to Education Underground. And so she has been admitted to the Idaho Legion at the youngest age that any individual has ever been admitted to the Idaho Legion. So this is owing to a number of things, but probably the most important one is her ridiculously incisive intelligence, and her a little bit annoying enthusiasm for stuff. So McKenna's like, mostly that. Yeah.
A little bit annoying.
Well, I'm not living in the same home with her, so I suppose that it could get to be more annoying than, for somebody who has to be subjected to it 24/7. Hello, Thomasons. Good to see you. Let's see, up to 21 here. I don't know how many people we're totally going to end up with total, but I'm expecting it to be north of 30 when we finally get everybody in here. Hoyd. Great, thanks, Blake. I was about to say, it's really helpful if you use your real names with your videos so that I can remember everybody's name, because it's a lot of people, but then now I've already lost control of that, so I'm not gonna worry about it.
I'm just gonna put this on you now. My name is Reagan. This is my mom's account.
Yeah, well, that's okay with me, Reagan. That's fine. You're welcome to. I will probably call you Katie half a dozen times, but just forgive me for that. Your mom's pretty cool anyway, though. So, and you can change your name, but please do not change your name to Turtle Woofles. I don't think that's a good idea, unless you really want me to call you that. I think I can probably remember Reagan if it comes to that. Okay, so let's do a couple of administrative things while we're waiting for the keep it sane, unlike last year. Well, I don't know how much you can really expect, Miss Descalzo. It's just gonna be what it's gonna be, and I have one class that I teach 4 days a week actually, which has somewhere between 75 and 80 junior high students in it. It's online. Well, it's hybrid, online and in person. And the chat is manic, I think is the word I'm looking for. Completely bonkers. There's no, I mean, it's junior high kids anyway, right? So what are you gonna do?
Pandemonium.
But with that many of them, forget it. Great. All right, we'll let William in here. Okay. Oh, I forgot that book too. Piles of books. So much stuff to talk about. So many things to deal with. So much time, so little to do. Wait, strike that. Reverse it. This is the main book that we're dealing with today. It is, in my opinion, the finest survey book for the ancient world. If you're looking at the full breadth of the world, there's hardly any book to match it. Frankly, I have no idea how anyone can know all the things that Susan Wise Bauer seems to know. It just doesn't seem possible that any human being could deal with that, but she seems to. Hey, Eliza, Ryan, very cool. Good morning, Bex. Very excited to see you. Susan Wise Bauer wrote 3 of these. I don't know why she didn't keep going. I really wish she had, but she wrote 3 of these. There's the classical world, the ancient world, the Renaissance world, and the medieval world. We're going to use all 3 of them over the course of the class. For right now, we're mostly in the ancient world, even though Ms. Bauer has constructed these books so that they are global rather than aimed specifically at Europe. Europe being since this is a European history class, the part that we're mostly concerned about. So we'll just pull the European history stuff out of it. But seriously, the woman has covered an unholy amount of information about every civilization on the planet. And having taught world history a large number of times, I can tell you there's no book like it. I have never found a survey world history book that's even close to what Susan Weiss Bauer does with her history of the ancient world, Renaissance world, and medieval world, which is why we're using them. For those of you who are interested in a little bit more specific information about a little bit more specific stuff, for instance, if you just totally get off on Greek history like it's the greatest thing ever, for many of you, you think that means Zeus and Hermes and Aphrodite and whatever. That is not actually Greek history. That's Greek mythology, which is not necessarily less interesting. So I'm not telling you not to research that stuff. If you're going to do that, the book you want is this one. Hold on a minute. And since you pretty much are going to do that, we might as well just bow to that. Bulfinch's Mythology is what you want for that. There are a number of mythology survey books that get into various different kinds of mythology. All of them are fine. By the way, Rick Riordan's novels do not count for that. I'm not telling you not to read them. Rick's a lovely man and he needs your money. But that's not really his take on mythology is not actually mythology. So it's mythological mythology. It's the Rona, run for your life. No, I went running this morning and so I'm hacking up a lung. Anyway, so I should never do that. I should know better. No exercise, bad idea. So one of the things I love about Bulfinch is that it also goes through all kinds of mythology, including things that normally don't get included in mythology, like Charlemagne. Much of what we quote know, unquote, about Charlemagne, and we're going to talk about Charles the Great a lot later on. I think we get to him. When do we get to him? I think January we get to Charlemagne. A lot of what, I mean, there really is a Charlemagne, okay, and he really did a lot of very cool stuff. But a lot of the stuff that we, quote, know about Charlemagne, unquote, is in fact mythology. And I love that Bulfinch includes that. So there's a ton of stuff about the legends of Charlemagne and things like that. I really recommend this book. I think, I'm trying to remember, there's a ton of legends of Charlemagne, which, wow, like the whole back half of the book here. I would have spent more of that on the legends of Arthur, but that's okay. Some of it you get in the Age of Chivalry, which there's a whole bunch of stuff in there about Britannic mythology. And there is a bunch of stuff about, in the Age of Chivalry, about Arthur, who is heavily mythologized, etc. You get the Lady of Shalott, which those of you who are my kindred spirits and who love Anne Shirley know about the Lady of Shalott. Let's let the Shevers in. There's all kinds of stuff, Hindu mythology, all sorts of legends and etc. We're going to talk about a couple of these. Yes, Botstan, yeah. I should never have taught you guys that. That was clearly a major error. Not that it's not fantastic, because it totally is, but anyway. But this is the main book that we're going to be dealing with. For those of you who want a little deeper dive into the actual Greek stuff, this is the best book I've ever found on this. This is, it's called A History of Greece, obviously, by J.B. Bury and Russell Meggs. The Bury and Meggs book on the history of Greece is, this is a college level textbook. In fact, this was the college textbook that I had when I took Greek history when I was at BYU. So strongly recommend this book. A lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about today comes from out this book. It's heavily mapped. It's got all kinds of maps. There we go, a little better. got tons of maps, all kinds of bibliography in the back, notes to illustrations. It has footnotes, endnotes, a great index. Anybody that you want to look up in here, you can look up in here, and you get some marvelous stuff. We're obviously gonna spend a little bit of time in Greece, but we got an incredible amount of stuff to cover. I did not realize when I put the thing together, I guess I wasn't paying attention, but when I put our class schedule together, I did not actually realize that we would be trying to cover everything from the Persian Wars through the Peloponnesian Wars and all the way up into Alexander the Great, all in the same lesson, because that's ridiculous. But we are, and we're gonna give it a shot. So, I mean, a lot of this stuff is just sort of drive-by. Ah, yes, the Thug Life Shebers have joined us, so that's good. Glad to see you. So let's just kick it off, shall we? When last we left our heroes, we had, hold on a minute. Oh, we are, good. Auto record, good, just wanna make sure. When last we left our heroes, we had just finished the sacking and burning of Troy. Now, out of the sacking and burning of Troy, we get, well, it's probably more than three, but there are three main narratives that come out of the end of the Trojan War. Four, I guess, if you count Ajax. And you probably should. Ajax is a play by Sophocles, and it's heartbreaking, as much of Sophocles' stuff was. We'll talk a little bit about Sophocles' plays and those kinds of things here in just a minute, but so who are the main, there are like three main threads that come out of the sacking of Troy. It's sheesh, people. For those of you who were not in last year's class and who did not get initiated into the wonders of Bostan, all of those messages need to be sung to the tune of Gaston from Beauty and the Beast. It is a bot that generates random lyrics to the song, which is simultaneously horrifying and incredibly awesome. Anyway, so where was I? Okay, so Troy. Who do you guys know who the three, I mean, there are three main like stories that come out of the end of the Trojan War. One of them is easy. You should probably know this one. He's like a whole book just about him, named after him, as a matter of fact. Do you know what that one would be?
Odysseus?
That would be
The
Odysseus.
Odyssey. The Odyssey.
Which would be the Odyssey. That's right. That's such a good book that an Odyssey now comes down to us as being a name for like a super long journey. The Odyssey, like the Iliad, was originally just a long memorized poem. If you've ever read the Odyssey, and how many of you have actually read the Odyssey? Or parts of it, kind of know what the deal is. You know how long it is? Well, it was memorized, and you would get the story played on a lute or a lyre or whatever over the course of like 3 or 4 days. So that's an impressive feat of memorization. It wasn't written down until really just a couple of thousand years ago. I think our first written copies of it are not older than about 500 BC. So, well, they didn't have much else to do. It's true that the number of videos on Netflix was very small then, and Amazon only had 300 or 400 books you could buy. So, really, what else could they do but sit around and listen to? But there was feasting, so, you know, as long as there's feasting, I'll sit and listen to your poem. So there's also some, everybody knows, I'm sure everybody knows who it is that is alleged to have written this. Talking about the Iliad and the Odyssey. Yes, Reagan.
Homer?
Homer. What do we know about Homer?
He's blind.
He's blind. Also possibly female. One theory. Nobody knows. All the photographs are really grainy and bad, and the security footage from his videos is terrible. So it's really hard to tell. No, we don't have anything, of course. We don't know anything really about Homer other than he was blind, which makes memorization kind of necessary because it's not like you're going to be able to read it off the teleprompter. So how long is it? Till about 11. Yeah, we're going to go till about 11 o'clock today. So yeah, but it's an impressive feat to memorize this. So Odysseus, who is famously the dude who came up with the magic horse that smuggled the Greeks into Troy and allowed them to open up the gates so that the rest of the Achaeans could get inside and slaughter all the Trojans. He's one of them, and it takes him 10 years to get home. Who are the other two? I'm really just choosing two here, but there's one other really big one, and then there's another one that you may not even realize is a part of this narrative. Anybody know the second one? So the two main ancient Greek things are the Iliad and the Odyssey, but there's an ancient Latin one too. Does anybody know what that is? It's very similar.
Achilles? Are you saying Achilles?
No, not
No,
Achilles.
that's the Iliad. Sorry.
Yeah, and he's dead. Achilles is dead.
Okay, true.
Paris shot him from cover of a rock because he's a coward. I don't like Paris. Maybe you can tell. This is, I think you should feel like you should know. This is the Aeneid, which was written later. A-N-I-D. There it is. The Aeneid, which is very much like the Odyssey, and a lot of people think that that's because the Romans, who stole so many other things from the Greeks, just stole that from the Greeks as well. But the Aeneid is the story of Aeneas, who was a Trojan, and who escaped from Troy carrying his father Anchises on his back. And he has many adventures. A lot of them will be real familiar if you've read the Iliad, because they're very similar to the ones in the Iliad. But then he ends up on the Italic Peninsula and founds a city that you may be able to guess the name of. Yes, he founds Rome. It is his grandsons, I believe, who are Romulus and Remus, who end up being the ones who are credited, mythologically anyway, with founding Rome. And we'll get to Rome later. So you have Aeneas and you have Odysseus. But who is like the big Achaean king, the guy who kind of masterminded the whole battle, the whole siege of Troy? Who was that? You may remember his name?
Menelaus?
No, he's
No.
the troglodyte who is the brother of this guy. Reagan?
Agamemnon?
Agamemnon. 5 points to Gryffindor. Well done, Hermione. So Agamemnon is our guy. Now, at the beginning, remember we talked a little bit about the beginning of the Trojan War, what Agamemnon had to do in order so the Greek ships could actually get out of port. You did spell that right. Well done, Elizabeth. Remember what he had to do? It was nasty and horrible. That's just a clue. He had to kill his youngest daughter, yes. He had to sacrifice her to Poseidon. I don't know what Poseidon's problem is, but he had to sacrifice her to Poseidon so that Poseidon would let the winds blow correctly so the Greeks could actually get across to attack Troy. Anyway, so he does it, of course, because that's what you do. Now, in Greek mythology, when you do something like that, do you get away with it? Spoiler alert, No, the gods are going to make sure you don't get away with it. In this case, the gods don't really intervene so much. But there is a play called Agamemnon in which we hear the story of Agamemnon. Does anybody know what happens to him when he leaves in triumph? He takes a captive with him. Does anybody know who this is? Her name is Cassandra. Very good. The Greeks would have spelled it with a K. Your mom. Yeah, no, not my mom. Maybe your mom. So, yes, he takes Cassandra. By the way, all the C's, we always spell these names starting with C. The Greeks, of course, didn't have a C. They had a K. So her name would be Cassandra with a K, as is, interestingly enough, Cleopatra. We'll get to her later, not today. But Cleopatra's name was also spelled with a K. Anyway, so yes, and does anybody remember what Cassandra's deal is? Reagan again.
She was cursed by the gods that she was a prophetess, and somehow I don't remember how she angered the gods, but she was cursed so that everything she prophesied, no one would believe it.
That's correct. She spurned Apollo, is what happened. There's a lot of people who spurn Apollo like it's sort of like it's a thing. But it always ends bad for them. Apollo is supposed to be this super manly, like all the sculptures of the perfect man are all Apollo. He's super manly, incredibly good looking, and none of the girls can stand him because whenever he falls in love with somebody, they're like, "Oh, gross, get away." And so maybe he smelled. I don't know what the deal is. Take a bath, boys. So I'm saying. So the girls are like, nah. And so then he always does nasty things to them because he's mad. So he gets mad. It could be attitude. Yeah. Although in Greece, attitude is like supposed to be a manly thing. I don't know. Nobody had more attitude than Achilles. Everybody thought he was hot stuff. So I don't know. Anyway, I didn't think he was that good looking, really. But, you know, I'm a dude, so maybe that's why. Anyway, so she's cursed. She tells the truth. So on the ship on the way home, she tells Agamemnon, you probably should not go home because this isn't going to end well. And of course, Agamemnon says, what are you talking about? Everybody at home loves me. I'm the conquering hero. So he gets home and then he goes to take a bath. So when you take a bath, gentlemen, make sure you like lock the door, whatever, I don't know, because he didn't do that. So while he was in the bath, his wife, Clytemnestra, threw a net over him so he couldn't get out of the bath. And then she and her lover filled him full of arrows. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Or maybe stabs him. That's good too. It depends on your interpretation or your piece of the myth here. So that's awesome. He comes to a terrible end. However, the other problem with that is that she does it in front of her children, who grow up seeing mom as a murderess and who eventually set a trap for her and her lover and kill her as well. It's great stuff. The whole House of Atreus. It's fabulous. Yeah. We'll talk a little bit about Oedipus later if you think that's bad. Anyway, so all of this stuff gets written down by Greek playwrights, but they come along much, much later. So that's where Game of Thrones came from. You're not entirely wrong about that. So after the Trojan War, we have what's called the Greek Dark Ages. There's a long period here where we have very little archaeology. You get some mud huts and some lovely piles of filth, but generally speaking, nothing else. Like you don't get big temples. We don't have any writing from this period. It lasts about 200 years, and nobody's really sure why. Greek civilization just more or less disappeared off the face of the earth. It gets, Oedipus is Blake, that's the one. Yeah, we'll get there in a minute. Because the story's even more ironically, brutally awful than that. Anyway, so, what was I saying? So there's this 200-year period where we really don't have any history at all. But then the Greeks sort of reemerge, and then you get a new kind of civilization, a new kind of Greek civilization anyway. They would not really have called themselves Greeks. Most of the time they wouldn't have. They would have identified themselves much more closely with their cities than with the larger geographical area. So for instance, you can probably tell me who the main players in the next part of our drama are. Who are the main city-states in Greece? Okay, Sparta is one of them. Yes, Athens is the other one. But there are other ones too.
Troy.
What?
Troy.
Troy is gone. We won't find Troy again until Heinrich Schliemann digs it up in the 1800s. Troy is not really Greek anyway. Troy's more of a Phoenician city. Other major Greek cities. There's a few you should be able to name. Olympus is a mountain, not a particularly high mountain either, if you want the truth. But there's not a lot of, it's not a big mountain range in Greece. There are some. Thebes, very good, Blake. Yeah.
Crete.
What?
Crete.
Crete is an island off the coast of Greece, not really, and by this point, Crete has really been destroyed by, I think, mostly from the volcanic eruption of the island of Thera, which blew the entire island into the atmosphere. Yeah, Ithaca is more of a land than a city. Thebes is one of them. Corinth is another one that you should probably remember. Also, there are other cities like Megara that are kind of vassal states to the two big boys. And there's no question that the big powers here, the major powers, are Athens and Sparta. What do we know about these guys? Thebes is actually spelled like this. We'll come back to Thebes under Alexander the Great here. What can you tell me about Athens and or Sparta?
Sparta was like a war city. They were ready for war a lot.
Yeah, Sparta's a monarchy. They have a king, but it's a sort of a weird kind of participatory monarchy, not the way we would normally think of like a king sitting on his throne. Very warlike, very, the kids from a very early age were raised together in bands that would become sort of like platoons and regiments in the army. They prized physical fitness, that's right. They were very tough on their kids. One of the rites of passage when the kids were about, I think it's 8 or 9, is they had to spend an entire, I can't remember whether it's 1 or 2 days outside with no food and no water and nothing, in order to like toughen. If they could get through that without breaking, then they could move on up into society. Yes, Reagan.
I read something about how if their babies didn't look strong from birth, they would give them to a neighboring tribe.
Yeah, or take them out and expose them on the hillside until they died. That's going to be a thing here in a minute. You may think you've heard this story before, but oh no, you totally haven't. It's never happened before. It'll be fun, they said. Yeah, it's pretty nasty. Here is one of the legends that, now here's another problem we have with Sparta. Sparta didn't write anything down. So we don't actually know what the Spartans were like, except through the eyes of the Athenians, who were the ones who wrote everything down. So this is kind of like learning about America by reading only Chinese reporting on the United States. So I'm not the fact that we have kind of an admiration for Sparta and that Sparta doesn't get completely trashed by the Athenians, I think is pretty impressive. Because really, the Athenians, well, they did a hack job on them anyway, but we don't really know a lot about Sparta from the Spartans. There's some archaeology, but not a lot. Women only got their names on their gravestones if they died in childbirth. I did not know that. I did not know that. Here's one of my favorite Spartan stories about Spartans. Okay, they hold this up as like an example of manly virtue. So there's this kid who's walking to school one day and he finds a fox sitting at the side of the road, a little fox kit who's like half frozen. So he picks the fox kit up and tucks him into his tunic and takes him to school. And because of the warmth of being like close to his body and whatever, the fox unfreezes and is hungry and starts to eat the kid. Starts to eat into the kid's stomach. Instead of screaming about it and throwing the kid sits there until he's literally sitting in a pool of his own blood and the fox has burrowed its way into his intestines. And he dies there but he just, he just toughed it out because that's what you do. And yeah, they hold this up as a good thing in Sparta. That is a good thing. Keep that in mind for later. There's one idiotic kid. Well, yeah, but pain, you got to admire the pain tolerance. You really do, don't you? I mean, anyway. We had a debate in one class one day about whether the kid was stupid or just crazy. Actually, is this a noble thing? Should we hold this up as a virtue or not? And most people are like, no, are you kidding me? That's not a virtue. That's ridiculously stupid. On the other hand, this is what Sparta prizes, the ability to overcome anything. And the Spartans more or less did, until an event that I will tell you about later. Anyway, so you have Sparta and Athens. If you're writing down notes, and sometimes you probably should, this is a thing you should write down. The Spartans versus the Athenians is called the Peloponnesian War because the Peloponnesian Peninsula is where they live. So let me spell this for you. There are two of these. Really, there's just one. They never really stops. But the Peloponnesian War is very good spelling. The Peloponnesian War is a critical Greek event. The Spartans and the Athenians really didn't get along. So we heard a little bit about Sparta. Somebody tell me some stuff about Athens. What's Athens like? Go ahead, the Eliza Beck account, Rachel.
Sorry about the Darth Vader background, if you heard that. It was my mom's ringtone. Okay, so Athens is value knowledge a lot. They also, I think, art and music too. And so, can't remember in detail, but they all wanted to be extremely smart. And of course, they thought they're smart. And in some way, yeah, they are, but still, they kind of overdo it sometimes. But still, they're also really, really smart. But they're not a war city, so when they fight with Athens, they mostly use their knowledge instead of their strength.
Reagan.
Because of their smartness, their patron goddess was Athena. Even though mythology.
In this case, knowledge, wisdom, really more wisdom, really, than knowledge. They're famed for their scholars and their artists. Almost all of what we think of as Greek art, almost all of that comes out of Athens. They're famed for fame. Well, that's actually not entirely inaccurate because, I mean, your fame comes from writing stuff down. Well, the only people writing stuff down are the Athenians. So they make themselves famous by being famous, I guess. We have all of the playwrights that you can think of: Sophocles, Aeschylus, what's his name? Aristophanes. All of those guys are all Athenians, and they stopped women from voting. I believe it's more accurate to say that they didn't allow women to vote. But since no one on earth allows women to vote until Mary Poppins, that's not wholly unusual. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying roughly Mary Poppins. How do you get famous in the first place? Well, you can get famous just by being famous, or you can do something notable that people want to pay attention to. Here are some key names, and the problem is there's just so much history to cover that we're going to talk about the awesome stories, and we don't really have time to get into some of the individuals that you should pay attention to. So I'm going to just give you a flyby on some of these individuals you should pay attention to. Okay? So one of them is a guy named Solon. Solon is known as a lawgiver. He gets himself a biography written by Plutarch. It's one of the lives of Plutarch. Solon was a Greek tyrant. The word tyrant is just Greek for king. It doesn't necessarily mean that in English, now a tyrant is a bad guy, right? But in Greece, a tyrant was just a king. He was a Greek tyrant, but he decided that it would be better, Plutarch Heavensby. Yes, Suzanne Collins ripped off a huge number of Roman names and applied them to various people, sometimes with a point, and sometimes just because it sounded cool. Plutarch is one of those guys. Anyway, so yes, tyranny, the word tyranny just means rule by one guy who nobody can say no to, really. So what you get is Solon decides to write down a code of laws. And he's the first one outside of Mesopotamia, where you get Hammurabi, who did this. He's the first one outside of Mesopotamia to do this, that we know of. And because he wrote all these laws down, he thought he'd done such a good job then that he could kind of take a sabbatical and go wandering around the ancient world. All of this stuff comes out of Herodotus. Herodotus writes what is just called the history, because before Herodotus there was no history. And okay, how do I explain this? All right, so by that I mean nobody was writing down facts about things that happened. It wasn't that they weren't writing things down. I mean, they did, but they would write down like grocery lists and names of people who lived in a village or whatever. They didn't write down the stories that happened to people. Those were all oral traditions, and they're mostly fiction. Herodotus is the first guy to say, you know what, there's going to be a lot of people here. We don't really know that much about each other. Maybe I should go around and learn everybody's stories and then write them all down. That's what he does, and that's what's called the history. So Herodotus writes the history, and in this he talks about Solon going off to meet various foreign kings. He ends up in Egypt for a while. He goes and visits the Hebrews. So there's some really interesting history that comes out of Herodotus. You should also know a guy named Pericles. Now we're going to get to Pericles a little more in a minute. But Pericles is from the Golden Age of Greece, one of the great Greek political leaders. Let me jump back for a minute. I'm going to come forward to Pericles in a minute, but let me jump back for a minute. When you get the Spartans and the Athenians, who are not always at war, sometimes they're not, because sometimes Greece is going to be invaded by foreign powers. Specifically, who's the main group that decides to invade Greece? They do it twice. Right now? Not Rome. The Romans will sort of invade Greece. It's the Persians. Well done,
Called it.
Christopherson. Yeah, that's right. So,
Not called.
I said Persia.
I'm glad to hear it. I'm not
Persia.
surprised, though, Isaac. You're smart that way. So anyway, the Persians invade.
I called it.
Actually, I said Persia.
Good job, and I just picked one, so then I can say.
You're all very smart. It's okay.
Yep, and I'm very smart.
Super smart. You're all far too smart for your own good. Anyway, there are two big Persian invasions. The first one is repelled. The first one under Xerxes is repelled by the Athenians at the Battle of Salamis. Yeah, these are the Persian Wars. Salamis, there's a Greek general, an Athenian general named Themistocles. You should probably know who this guy is, since he's a pretty big deal. So Themistocles is a Greek general, is an Athenian general. And when the Persians invade, Themistocles looks at the Persian army and says, that's an awful lot of guys. I don't know if we can beat these guys. So he sends an emissary to the oracle at Delphi to say, Delphi is another city that you might want to know. The Delphic oracle is Apollo's, like when you need a prophecy, you go to the Delphic oracle, right? So he goes to the oracle, and the oracle says, if thou art to defeat the Persians, thou shouldst trust to the wooden walls. Now, at this time, so everybody's like, cool, well, then we hunker down in our city and wait for them to go away. Because at this time, Athens had a wooden wall around it that enclosed it and its port, which is not actually, Athens is a little farther inland, but it's all sort of like one big sprawling city. Anyway, so they're like, well, it's great. We have these wooden walls. We'll hunker down behind them. We'll be fine. But Themistocles' idea was that they should, that what the oracle actually meant, because the oracle is always famous for like speaking out of both sides of its mouth. Like you can interpret it one way and you can interpret it another way. For instance, one Lydian king sent off to the oracle to find out if he should invade the neighboring kingdom. And so the oracle sends back and says, if you invade this kingdom, you will destroy a great nation. And he's like, sweet, that's awesome. And so he invades. But the oracle meant his kingdom, which got destroyed because he invaded the other guy. So the Delphic oracle is really like big on giving you like super obscure answers, right? So the wooden walls thing, Themistocles says, you know, what if it doesn't mean the obvious thing like the walls around the city? What if the wooden walls means our ships? And everybody's like, that's stupid. It doesn't mean that. But Themistocles is like, yeah, you know what? I bet it does. And so at the Battle of Salamis, the Greeks defeated the Persian navy. And because of that, the Persian army had to march back home because they couldn't resupply. They couldn't get food. They couldn't get new troops to replace their troops. It basically cut off their supply lines, and so they were all going to starve to death. So they had to march back home, and that's how the Athenians defeat the Persians the first time. The second time, though, is the one everybody knows about, because the second time has the fantastically heroic defense of the Greek peninsula at Thermopylae. That's pretty awesome. Let me see here. Where is my map of Thermopylae? Does anybody know the story that I'm about to tell here? Yeah, that'll do right there. Kind of. This is a picture you can't really see very well. It doesn't really do the job that I wanted to, but we'll give it a shot here. So, why don't I put that over on screen too? Then I can still see you. Hold up a second. All right, does that work? Can you guys see that? Approximately where that road is, it's now a highway, but approximately where that road is, used to be the, I use Discord? Yes, of course I do. Used to be the, the coffin is my Aunt Kay, who died not very long ago. This is the pass at Thermopylae. So the ocean would have come up to about where the, about where this road is here. It's now like a couple hundred yards farther off. But, so there's this narrow place right here. There's this narrow place right here that would have been the only way that you could get by if you're going to get into mainland Greece. So the Persians march up to this, can you friend me? Sure, why not? You'll have to friend me because I won't remember. Anyway, so this is the only way that you could get by. So it's this narrow neck of land that is being defended by, or that needs to be defended by the Greeks. Otherwise, the Persians will just march right through, and there's so many of them that they're just going to walk right over the Greeks and destroy everything, burn everything. So the Athenians always have to have a big, long discussion about everything, because being a democracy, and we'll talk a little bit more about Greek democracy in a minute, being a democracy, everybody has to vote on everything. The Spartans don't have this problem. If they want to fight, they just fight. The king says, let's go fight, and we'll go fight. So in this case, the Athenians send an embassy to the Spartans that said, listen, we're still talking about this. We don't know what we want to do yet. But at the speed the Persians are marching, they'll destroy us before we can get our armies together. So the Spartans are like, okay, we'll handle this. You guys talk, whatever you got to do, we'll take care of this. So they send the Spartan 300 to the pass at Thermopylae. Now, I got to clear up a couple of myths to start with. First of all, there's a lot more than 300. There are 300 Spartan knights. This would be the equivalent of knights in the Middle Ages, more or less. It's not exactly, but it's pretty close. So a knight is not just by himself, right? He's got his equipage. He has a page with him to help him get into and out of his armor. He may have squires, etc. Same sort of thing here. So they send 300. It's not really 300. It's like 330, 340 Spartan knights. These are the main line fighters, your heavy shock troops. But they all have support staff with them. So it's probably closer to like 2,000 or 3,000 Spartans show up at this pass to blockade it. And they set up their, you can kind of see here, sort of like trench fortifications here. They kind of set up these little fortifications to make it harder for the Persians to attack them, and so their cavalry doesn't work, because Persian cavalry is a big deal. Their chariots won't work. They make the ground rough, and then they hunker down behind this and they wait for the Persians to come. Well, it doesn't take very long. The guy who runs the operation, his name is Leonidas. And there is a plaque at Thermopylae celebrating the deeds of Leonidas, which I really better get to see this next summer. Is all I'm going to say about that. since I was supposed to see it this last March and I didn't get to, and I'm a little frosted about that. COVID better go away so I can go see it this year because I'm getting a little bit chafed. Anyway, so I want to go see this. These guys have been heroes of mine all my life. So Leonidas blockades the pass with his 300 Spartans against, it depends on who you ask. Herodotus says that there's 1 million Persians. There's not. You can't move 1 million people in the ancient world. You just can't. Everybody has to walk. How do you eat? How do you feed 1 million people with no machinery? How do you even do that? Well, you don't. Here's my favorite thing to think about. If you think you might be able to come up with a meal plan, okay, great, to feed 1 million people, how do you get rid of all of their poop? Because just because it's a battle doesn't mean guys ain't gonna poop. Where do you put all that? I'm just saying. Because poop is one of the 6 things that everybody does. This is one of the big 6. Everybody's gonna do that in their life. If you're gonna fight a battle, you better deal with all 6 of these things. Okay? You better dig a hole. How big of a hole do you need for 1 million people? It's like the size of New Jersey, okay? You can't possibly you can't dig latrines enough. Oh, the big 6? Okay, here are the big 6. You're born, you sleep, you eat, you poop, you have sex, and you die. Those are the big 6. Everybody does those. If you are going to run an army, you better plan for all 6 of those things. Otherwise, yes, yuck. When you're older, you might not mind so much. Anyway, but you better plan for it anyway. Because look, your soldiers are going to seek out women. They're going to, right? If you haven't planned for this, they're going to be doing that when you're supposed to be on the battlefield and you're going to have problems. I'm not kidding about this. You're like, ooh, gross. I'm sorry. If you're a general, you better plan for this. So there's probably not 1 million, but there's a lot. Reliable estimates are maybe 250,000, which is still a gigantic army, okay? That's a huge number of people. You have 250,000 people against 300, that's pretty bad odds. So it might have been more, it probably wasn't any less than that. This is a huge army. But they're not all fighters. They're all there to be army people, or they're all there to fight, but they're not necessarily fighters. Do you get the distinction? Sometimes you just grab a bunch of people and say, okay, you guys are a regiment or whatever. You go first. And so you got, your foot soldiers, and maybe you gave these guys like a club or something. They don't get metal. They don't have swords. You don't give these guys spears or any of that kind of thing. You give them sticks and whatever, and these guys go in and kind of soften up the enemy. You expect most of them to get killed, but hey, it's not a big deal because you can always get more. So you're not expecting these guys to be important. I'll dig it up in a minute, and I'll let you know on the Discord thing. So some of these foot soldiers would have slings. You know what that is, right? It's just a leather strap with like a pouch on it. David and Goliath, think David and Goliath. Stick a little rock in there, whirl it over your head, and then let go of one of them, and so they call those guys slingers. They would also have guys who just threw rocks. And some of them would have other kinds of, oh, there you go. Isaac, hold that up again. Okay, so yeah, sort of like that. You might have had sort of slingshot type things. You didn't have rubber, so you're not going to do the rubber bands, but you get a bunch of stuff like that. So if you get enough of those guys, you get 20 or 30,000 of those guys, they're going to kill some of the Spartans, and you don't need them to kill all of them. You only need to just loosen them up. really, all they do is make the Spartans get tired from killing them. Because the Spartans are opposing these guys with real fighters.
Or they could kill the important ones.
I mean, these guys have been fighting all their lives. They are arguably the finest fighting force in the world at the time. So they send, 50,000 of these foot soldiers, just, pouring at them in waves. And the Spartans, who do have metal and who have spears and who have swords, basically just kill them like cutting the grass. But, as you know, if you've ever cut the grass, after a while, you get tired. Reagan's like, I don't get tired cutting the grass. I never get tired. Fine, Hermione. Okay. Honestly, she's a nightmare. I mean, even if all you're doing is raising your arm and bringing it down to crush somebody's skull, you do that 1,000 times, your arm's going to fall off. Like, you get really tired. Anyway, so they kill, you have like a half square inch of grass. Oh, fine. All right, whatever. You know what I mean, though. Even if you're like, I can hold my arm up forever, that's not true. You hold your arm out from to the side from your body, maybe you can do that a half an hour. If you're holding a sword, you can't do anything like that long. And if you're using it to smite people, it's even harder. So the biggest problem for the Spartans is not that these guys that the Persians are sending against them are dangerous. It's that there's so many of them that they're getting exhausted killing them all.
Hey, Mr. C?
Yeah.
Blake got kicked out or something, so he needs let back in.
Oh, he showed up over here. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I got yep. He showed up over on my shared screen. I should stop sharing my screen.
Mr. C.
Oh, also Sabrina made it. Oh, that's good. Okay, cool. Sorry, I didn't see that. Thanks for letting me know. So why is that over there? Why isn't that over here anymore?
Mr. C.
Yeah.
Also, if you're using a sling, it takes a lot of effort to use that than a sword, and you might get a lot less exhausted from it if you know what you're doing.
Right, but for the Spartans, it's cowardly to do that. In fact, here's the only not the only legend, but one of the legends we have about this. So they have first, before they fight, you have to get together and at the coin flip in a football game, you get out there and they have to, hey, how are you, wave at each other and shake hands or whatever, then have to flip a coin or whatever. So you have to have the negotiations first, right? So this is one of the very first examples of trash talking in the ancient world. So the Persians yell over to the Greeks, our arrows are so many, or our spears are so many, when we throw them, they will blot out the sun. And Leonidas yells back, then we will fight in the shade. So there's a lot of Persians. And the first day, the battle does not go well for the Persians. The Persians just get butchered like cattle. There are big piles of Persian bodies. In the evening, the Spartans send their squires out to shovel the bodies away so that they can still see the Persians are coming. So the second day, the Persians are like, okay, well, that didn't work because the Spartans lost essentially nobody. Really, all 300 of them are still alive. So they didn't get anywhere and they didn't kill any of the Spartans, and so that didn't work. So the second day they send in their real troops, the real heavy guys. The guys who are not professional soldiers because they didn't really have those, but essentially professional soldiers. They're best fighters. So they send those in there and the Spartans kill them just about the same way. Spartan swords tear right through their bronze armor. They chop them into bits. And there are tens and tens and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of these guys. But they can't all fight because they bottleneck down into as you can see kind of how narrow that is. You can't get all 100, you can't flank them because you have the ocean on one side and the mountains on the other side. You can't get around them. So really, the Spartans are always only fighting the same number of guys. No matter how many more guys they have, they can't push the Spartans off. So at the end of the second day, after another 50,000 Persians are dead, the Persians are like, we can't beat these guys. Like, we can't get through here. We can't do this. But we have so many more guys than they do. There's got to be a way. So what they do is they send a couple of guys up into the mountains, a scouting party up there, and they capture a Greek shepherd. This guy's name I'm going to tell you because you need to know the names of traitors. Although maybe you don't want to know, but anyway, I always remember this guy's name. His name is Ephialtes. There is still nobody in Greece named Ephialtes. It's like naming your kid Hitler. Okay, you don't name your kid that. Okay, so yeah, Ephialtes or Benedict Arnold. Yeah, you have eggs Benedict, but nobody names their kid Benedict, except there was a movie, the guy named Benedict in it. Anyway, so nobody names their kid Ephialtes. So they capture this guy and they torture him until he reveals the way. There's a pass through the mountains. So then the Persians send a couple thousand guys up through the pass to come around behind the don't do that. Don't name your kid Adolf Hitler. Anyway, so if you name your kid Adolf Hitler and the kid kills you in your sleep, I will vote to acquit him. I will vote not guilty for murder because you frickin' deserve that. That's self-defense. You can't be allowed to live. That's self-defense, in my opinion. Anyway, so names a kid ew, yeah, Beto. Don't name your kid stuff like that. Anyway, so they get around behind the Spartans, and finally, now the Spartans are surrounded. It still takes the whole day for them to finally kill all the Spartans so that they can get through the darned pass and get onto it takes 3 whole days. If you go there, there is a plaque that talks about how this happened and why it's important. Because think about it for a second. Most of our cultural ideas about democracy, about government, even a great deal of our language, the Bible is mostly written in Greek. If the Persians come through this pass and wipe out the only city-state in Greece that actually writes anything down, what are the chances we're even having this class? They're not good. You could argue that those 300 saved Western civilization, like all of it, because without the 3-day delay that the Spartans gave to the Athenians to get their act together, we would have lost, they would have burned Athens to the ground, no question about it. You can probably get away with naming your kid Shalin or possibly Shalan, depending on what sort of nastiness you want, or how you want to pronounce that. Anyway, not too long after this, there is a tremendous battle in which the Athenians and the Spartans and everybody sort of managed to get their act together and put a big army on the field, and they battle with the Spartans, or they battle with the Persians, and they defeat them. After the battle is over, a kid named Phidippides, do not name your kid Phidippides either, although this kid's a hero. A kid named Phidippides does something that is one of the great noble feats of all history, and that provides us with a cute little piece of trivia. Does anybody know who Phidippides is? Does anybody know who this guy is? You should. Pheidippides is the first great long distance runner. So Pheidippides, I'm going to tell you the legend first, and I'm going to tell you the history. Okay, so the legend is Pheidippides runs from the town where the battle happened to the Acropolis in Athens and runs the whole way and then yells the word victory and falls dead of a heart attack or exhaustion or whatever. Okay? Of course you know the story. What's the name of the town he ran from? You all know the name of this town. Some of you just don't know.
Marathon.
It's Marathon. It is not actually 26.2 miles exactly from the battlefield to the Acropolis in Athens, but it's pretty close. Dippin' Dots. No, that was the ice cream chain he founded. If I ever found an ice cream chain, I'm calling it Dippin' Dots. Anyway, so Pheidippides is supposed to have run this 26 miles and then said victory and then collapsed of a heart attack. That's not the history. The history is that first he ran to Sparta and then he ran to Athens. That's about 70 miles. So this is like an ultra marathon. It's like 3 marathons back to back to back. And I can imagine a guy dying of exhaustion at the end of that. 26.2 miles, yeah, I mean, I don't think I can run that far. But he ran to Sparta first, which is like 50 miles farther away, and then to Athens. So we're looking at like 7,500 miles here. So then he died, and so the word marathon now comes to mean a distance of 26.2 miles, and it's named after the town where this battle took place. All right. What's the other bit of history? Oh, freak, Alexander. But first we have to do Greek plays. We don't have time to read any of these. Last year, we had a great time doing an abridged version of the play Antigone. I'm going to tell you, this is my list of Greek plays you should read. Like, seriously, I mean this, you really should read this. The number one play, no question about this, is Antigone. It is the best of all of the Greek plays. The story of Antigone revolves around Antigone, who is our title character, who is a young woman whose brother, she has 2 brothers. One of them is the king of her city, which is Thebes. We go 2 hours usually on these. No, the guy is not named Marathon, that's the town. So Antigone has a brother. One of their names is, I'm going to be able to remember if I stop trying to. But anyway, she has 2 brothers. One of them is king of the city, and one of them is a rebel who fights against the king. It's kind of a complicated story. The deal was, well, first let's go back to Oedipus, because this all goes back to Oedipus. I think it was Blake was telling me kind of the story of Blake. Blake was telling us the story of Oedipus. So briefly, Blake, what's the story of Oedipus?
Basically, the guy kills his dad and marries his mom straight out.
Killed his dad and married his mom, yeah.
That's the basic story.
That's about as briefly as you can tell it. So when Oedipus is born, there is a prophecy that he will grow up to kill his father and marry his mother and destroy the kingdom. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
I know this story. I like this story.
Okay.
So, when the boy was born, the seer of the city, I believe seer is the right word, prophesied.
Yes.
The boy, it was, yeah, words. Once I can't words apparently. It was prophesied that this boy would kill his father and marry his mother. So of course his parents are shocked. And so what they do is they send him off to a neighboring kingdom. I believe he's raised by shepherds, but I know it's in a different kingdom.
They leave him out on a hillside to die. But of course,
And he's rescued. And he comes back, and I don't remember the exact circumstances, but he does end up killing his father. Either, I believe it's by accident.
McKenna.
Okay, so when he's left on the hill to die, so they do that because they don't want to anger the gods, but they don't want the prophecy to come true, even though all the time it never works. It always comes true. Like, there's never been a single prophecy that hasn't come true. So I don't know why they even try. But so they don't.
Master Oogway, one often finds one's destiny down the road one has taken to avoid it.
Exactly. So that's what happens all the time. Anyways, so he gets found by a shepherd, and then he gets adopted by the king and queen of, what is it, Crete? Can't remember.
Whatever the neighboring, I forget what the neighboring kingdom is.
The
But it's
neighboring
like,
kingdom. So he grows up with who he believes are his parents, and he hears the prophecy, and he's like, no way, I would hate to kill my parents. But he thinks his parents are the people who adopted him. So then he travels to the kingdom where he was actually born and gets in a fight with the king, but he didn't know he was the king, and he also didn't know that the king was his father. So he gets in a fight, and when you get in a fight, you kill the other person and you win. And then he goes on his way and thinks nothing about it, and he goes to the queen. Oh no, before that he solves the Sphinx's riddle.
there you go. He solves the
And
riddle
then-
of the Sphinx. You guys know the riddle of the Sphinx? Do you know what it is?
I know the answer. I forgot
Yeah.
I know the gist of the riddle.
Does anybody know the actual riddle?
Yeah, it's like what walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs in the afternoon, and then 3 legs in the evening. And the answer is a person as he goes through life.
As we all know, the real riddle was, what has it got in its pocketses?
Oh,
We know
yeah.
that's the real riddle, but that's okay. The Sphinx, anyway. So carry on, McKenna. You're doing great.
So after that, everyone kind of rewards him, and they're like, "Oh, you saved the city from the Sphinx! Yay! Let's make you king because, big news! Someone just murdered the king." So he gets to marry the queen, not knowing that the queen is his mother, and not knowing that he murdered his dad, who is also the king, so that he gets to marry the queen, who's also his mother. And he has 4 kids with his mom, queen wife, and and then he figures out that there's all these rumors of like how the king died because there was actually a servant who watched Oedipus kill the king / father, and so Oedipus, who is now the king, he tells the servant, he's like, I want you to come tell me the whole story. And then he's like, oh, I murdered the king. So he tells everybody, and I forgot what happened after that, but
Yeah,
that's roughly what happened.
Yeah, that's very good. Well done, McKenna. So yes, Tiresias actually comes back and says, I got something horrible to prophesy. And Oedipus is like, it's okay, we can handle the truth, it's fine. And then he says, yeah, you know that over there, that's your mom. And he's like, no, you lie, you're a horrible person, and thrusts him out of his presence or whatever. But of course, then, it all goes to pieces. So then he ends up putting out his own eyes. And yes, Evan.
I think that, sorry, I thought you were done before I raised my hand. I think that if anybody has ever a prophecy where their child is destined to kill them or something, I think the best shot you've got at avoiding the prophecy is like taking care of the child and not leaving them to die. Because why would your own child try to kill you if you've raised him all these years Like, I would try to kill my parents if I knew that they left me on a mountainside to die and I got raised by a bunch of, like, farmers. Like,
You know, maybe keep them home, celebrate their birthdays, help them understand why they should love you instead of killing you. And then, I mean, what? I don't understand this. It's like everybody went to Elsa and Anna's parents' parenting school. Conceal, don't feel? Yes. No, that's horrible advice. What are you, where do you get this stuff? This is a disaster.
Mr. C, I saw a really cool alternate ending for this type of prophecy. And it was, so the king heard this prophecy, he's like, oh, you should abandon your kid or whatever. And just king's like, no. And so they grow up and nothing's happening. The kid's not killing his dad. And then it gets to the point where the dad gets really, really sick. And the son goes, okay, I'll just put him out of his misery. He's going to die anyway. Which I think is a really cool alternate ending to that kind of prophecy.
It's very interesting, and that's cool. Anyway, so of course the whole family is now cursed. The 4 kids, 2 of them are brothers who are now supposed to take, I mean, the king is dead. Oh, by the way, the mom, Yocasta, hangs herself when she finds out, which seems actually a fairly reasonable response to finding out that you have married your son and had 4 children with him. Anyway, so she hangs herself. It's all awful stuff. The whole thing is terrible, right? So the 4 kids, if they share a throne, they will just fight, says Adrian. This is why Adrian is the recipient of the very first Valentine Wiggins Scholarship ever awarded, because of her incandescent brilliance. Yes, they will. So they made a deal, okay? They're going to switch. Every year, a different one will be king. So the first one takes over as king, he serves his year, and then he gives it up to his brother, and his brother is king for a year. And then when the year is over, his brother's like, nah, I'm not going to give it up. And so his other brother's like, hey, dude, I gave it up to you. You might want to promise. You going to keep your promise? He's like, no. He's like, okay, fine, I'm going to revolt. So he revolts against his brother. And this is called 7 Against Thebes, and there's a whole thing that goes along with it. Anyway, we don't have time to get into that. The daughters, these are the 2 brothers. The 2 daughters are Antigone and Ismene. And Antigone, when the rebel brother is killed attacking the city, but also kills his twin brother. So they're going to have, these 2 brothers are both dead. The new guy, the uncle who comes in and says, all right, I'm going to clean up this mess. The uncle comes in and says, we're going to bury one brother in state with the whole full honors and everything. But the other one, he has to his body just has to lie out there until it's eaten by birds and dogs and whatever. We're never going to bury him. And Antigone says, well, that sends my brother to hell. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to make sure he gets buried. So she goes out and sprinkles the dirt on him and buries him and gets arrested for this because she's broken the law and condemned to be executed. The brother and a sister may or may not work. Yeah, possibly. It depends. Some brothers and sisters I've seen could maybe make it work. Others fight like a bag of wet cats. So, anyway. So that's one of my favorite analogies because you can kind of imagine what that sort of fighting is going to be like. Anyway, so Antigone, the play, and the uncle does. Yes, the uncle takes the throne. You're very good. That's right, Blake. So Antigone, the whole play, Antigone, is about, is it more important to honor the law of the gods or the law of the state? A thing which right today is still supremely on people's minds. We are still arguing about this 2,500 years later because it's still relevant. And we still don't have good answers to this for, well, some people don't. I think I have a reasonable answer to it, but, of course I would think that, right? So, anyway, that's the play Antigone. There are a few more that are really valuable to read. There's a whole trilogy called the Oresteia, which is about Orestes, who I think is the son of Agamemnon and Clytemnestra. and who is one of the ones who avenges his father's death by killing his mother, who was avenging his sister's death by killing his father, etc. This is very Greek. All this stuff is really super Greek. Another play, I really recommend the Oresteia. Ajax is a terrific play, also by Sophocles, in which the hero of the play, Ajax, he was a Greek hero in the Trojan War, but he was bitten by a snake. Is this Ajax? I think this is Ajax. Robbed of his honor in a horrible way, and he comes home with the most atrocious PTSD. And it really is a play about PTSD and the horror of returning from 10 years of war. I strongly recommend it. There is a group, what's the name of the group? I'll think of it in a minute. But they go to military bases and they perform these plays about pain and the suffering and the horror of war for veterans. The guy who does this got the idea when he was in college, and his roommate was a Gulf War vet and had horrible PTSD. And the guy's taking an ancient history class. He's like, I don't want to read all this crap. It's terrible. So, but this guy, because he knew, Brian Dories is his name, I think. He knew that the play was about PTSD and about the things that this guy was going through. So he stayed up all night and translated the play into modern English and gave it to the guy to read. And he read it and he's like, this is amazing. Like, I didn't realize that's what this play was. So now they go around to military bases and perform these plays for veterans. And I think it's a marvelous thing to do. Theater of War is what it's called. And I think it's a great thing to do because Sophocles understood what war was about. He was a soldier in the Peloponnesian War, and the Peloponnesian War lasted about 10 years. So he'd been away from his family and fighting in this war, watching his friends die for 10 years. And he understood what this was about. In fact, the first time these plays were performed, they were performed at military bases, and all the performers were soldiers. So you can imagine how this would have affected them to go to do a play about the madness that comes from war and from post-traumatic stress. Really amazing stuff. I also recommend to you a play called The Clouds. This is a blasphemous play. It is a play about how the gods are stupid. It's written by a guy named Aristophanes, and he was a satirist, and so he wrote this play called The Clouds, and it won an award. Everybody loved it. It's hilarious. It's funny even now, but you can kind of imagine how much funnier it would have been in ancient Greece, when all of this stuff was still super fresh on their minds and everybody was sort of deeply into the gods thing. So I really recommend Greek theater. There are good videos. The Greek gods is it's like super blasphemous. And yet the Greeks sort of you could mock the gods if you were careful. If you were careful about it. Don't mock them to their faces. Botston is a bot that generates random lyrics to the Gaston song. It's like the ones that are being periodically posted in the chat. And I'm ignoring because we're not doing that right now. Anyway, all right, let's move on for the last few minutes to talk about Alexander the Great. Greek society, you got to understand how this works, okay? If you're a Utahn and you need to make fun of somebody, you talk about how they're from Idaho. Because everybody knows the people from Idaho are basically
You would
uncultured.
know.
Yeah. They're basically just uncultured hicks. When I grew up in Virginia, it was the West Virginians. If you wanted to mock somebody for being like a, country mouse, doesn't know anything, big gaps in their teeth, horrible dental hygiene, don't know anything at all, it's the rubes from West Virginia. In fairness, if you're from Kentucky, you also mock the people from West Virginia, or if you're from Tennessee, or if you're from Maryland, or if you're from any of the states that touch West Virginia, they all mock West Virginia because, frankly, the stereotype comes from somewhere. Let me just say that. The thing you used to say is West Virginia. 748,000 families, 4 last names. That's all I'm going to say. So yeah, West Virginia. So we sort of look down like Utahns, most of them have never really been to Idaho, mock Idahoans for being that same kind of thing. Now my guess is you guys either pick on Montana or Wyoming, but pretty much everybody picks on Wyoming for good reason. If you've ever been to Wyoming, I'm just saying. You pick on yourselves. Yeah, I guess if you're from Boise, you pick on the people from Rexburg, which is fine because frankly they deserve it. But anyway, California, there you go. Wyoming is one of the most boring states ever, indeed. Yeah. Yeah, West Virginia is actually quite beautiful, and the people there are very nice. So, but in Greece, it's the same thing. If you're Athenians, you look down on the Spartans. If you're the Spartans, you look down on the Corinthians. If you're the Corinthians and the Thebans, you look down on the Macedonians because they live in the hills. They don't go to school. They're all barefoot, raggedy, uncultured country folk. They speak with a funny accent. It's their,
That makes me think of the bridge cruise in Way of Kings.
Undoubtedly, you would think of that, wouldn't you? Yes.
Bridge 4 especially.
Yeah, everybody looks down on these guys. Hobbits, there you go. Hobbits, they're barefoot. They just garden. What can they do? Yes, of course other people have read it. A couple of million people have read it last I looked. Anyway, well, at least they bought it. I don't know whether they read it or not, but I guess they bought it. Anyhow, so the Macedonians are like nothing, okay? We should talk, when we're talking about Athens, we should talk about philosophers. We don't have a chance to talk about philosophers. But there are 3 biggies that you have to know from Athens in terms of philosophers. Who are the big 3?
Is one of them Aristotle?
Aristotle is one of them. Come on, you know these guys. Plato and Socrates. That's correct. We don't have time to get into this, which is horrible because Socrates is amazing. Plato is probably also amazing, although it's hard to know. And Aristotle, of course, is Aristotle. This is leaving out people like Pythagoras, who essentially invented mathematics and other kinds of things like that we just don't have time to get into because we got so much stuff to cover. So anyway, first I have to tell you about the defeat of the Thebans because you're going to love it. Actually, I'll come back to it. I'll come back to this later. But I want to talk about Alexander. So Alexander's father's name is Philip. This is Philip II. You do have to know this guy. Philip II becomes king of Macedon, and then pretty much immediately starts going around and consolidating power. He's scooping up other little kingdoms, other villages, building up his army, because Philip has conceived of this very interesting military formation that he's going to use with his troops that nobody else has ever used before. It's a thing called the phalanx. In a phalanx, you have your front row of soldiers, but then you stagger the second row over a pace so that the heads of the second row of guys looks between the heads of the front row of guys, right? And then you stack your soldiers like this so that you can have more than one line of guys bring their weapons to bear at a time. He's the first guy to come up with this that we know of. He also gives his troops a thing called the sarissa. And I'm going to get a picture of this because you got to see what this looks like. That's a good one right there. Where is, oh, here we go. Share the screen. I want this one here. Okay, so here is an example of a sarissa phalanx. These spears are 20 feet long.
That's ridiculous.
Imagine charging that. So this is your sarissa phalanx. And this is the thing that Philip puts together, and no wonder his armies are successful. So they start cleaning up around, picking up lots of new soldiers, conscripting new soldiers, training them. His army gets bigger and bigger. And finally, I have to show you a map now.
It's a massive porcupine that wants to kill you.
There you go. Yeah. A weaponized porcupine. Yes. That's not a bad example. Words of Philip. Yeah, this will do. Okay, so here is the map. I love my maps. Here's a map of the appropriate area. Here's Macedon, and this is where Philip, and it's kind of hill country, you know, where Philip and his son come from. Down here you have Delphi. Here's Delphi. Down here Thebes, Athens, Megara, Corinth. Sparta's over in here, right down here. Okay. So Macedon, Philip starts getting to the point where he's like, you know what? I want more land for my kingdom. So I'm going to go down into Greece and start attacking the cities in Greece. So he goes to a place called Thebes. At this point in Greek history, Thebes is the biggest, most powerful city because the Thebans have defeated the Spartans in battle. Now they're like, wait, nobody defeats the Spartans in battle. So here's the thing. The Spartans have been beating up on everybody in the peninsula forever, right? Because they train their guys forever, and I don't know, I just do. I love maps. I don't know. Why do you love apple pie and baseball or whatever you love? 'Cause you don't? Well, that's what's wrong with you right there. Anyway, so the Spartans have conquered Thebes and exacted tribute from the Thebans for a long time, generations. And the Thebans, there's one particular Theban general who's getting kind of tired of this. His name is Epaminondas. And so Epaminondas starts, and I'm going to spell, my father wanted to name me Epaminondas. My mother threatened to walk out on him if he did, and so he gave it up. But Epaminondas is awesome, okay? So Epaminondas is a Theban general, and he starts drilling his troops, and there's two specific things that he does with these guys. One is, once when Epaminondas was like a foot soldier and they were fighting this skirmish, his shield broke, but it didn't break all the way through, it just cracked. And at the top of the shield, this crack, a piece of it fell out, so there was this notch in the shield. So when he went to fight, he put his spear into the notch in his shield, and then it wouldn't dislodge. So he's fighting in the line, and his spear is steady because it's in this V notch, right? And he's like, hey, this is pretty awesome. Everybody's like, your shield's busted. And he's like, yeah, watch this. And everybody else's spear is like sliding up and down on their shield. And Epaminondas is like, stab, stab, stab. And they're like, hey, wait, what are you doing? Like, what? Show me how you did that. So he starts training his soldiers with this V notch cut into their shields to hold their spears. But then he also has his troops, I don't know whether you know how this works, like you can imagine from that phalanx line, right? What happens is the armies march up toward each other and then they crash into each other and then they push. You stab, you know, you hack at people. They even had little kids sometimes, like little kids, crawl through the lines with a dagger and stab the feet of the other guys. Super nasty, okay? But you can imagine probably fairly effective. Anyway, so it's a big grunting, pushing mass, and whichever side pushes the other guys back, that's the side that's going to win. And no one has ever succeeded in cracking the Spartan line. They can hold out longer than you can. They're stronger than you. They're going to hold out longer than you can, and eventually they're going to push, you're going to give ground, and they're going to smash your line open, and then they're just going to kill you, right? So here is Epaminondas, and he says, if we're going to win, first of all, we got a technological advantage because we have this V-notch in our shield. Second, though, we are not going to crack. So he marches his phalanx up to this escarpment, this piece of rock, like a cliff, like a climbing wall. And he puts them up against the wall, and he has them push on the wall for hours in the sun, in their armor, with their shields, pushing on the wall. Well, the wall doesn't move, of course. But eventually like they can hold out for a long time. Like they start to get really strong pushing against this rock. So he says, at a critical moment in the battle, I am going to blow my horn. And when I blow the horn, I'm going to cry. You're all going to shout, and I want you to give me 1 foot. I just want you to push forward 1 foot. That's all I want. And so they practice this and practice this. And finally, the Spartans come for tribute. And basically, Epaminondas says, stick it up your nose. We're not giving you any tribute. And the Spartans are like, oh yeah, well, we'll be back and make you. And Epaminondas is like, well, you and what army? And they're like, well, that's the point. And he says, oh yeah. So then they have a battle outside the walls of Thebes. And it's the middle of the day. What is the name of the battle? I can think of it if I stop trying to think of it. Thebans come marching down the hill, Spartans come marching up the hill, bam, the arms crash into each other, and they're pushing and grunting and shoving and stabbing and, you know, punching with their spears and stabbing with their little knives and all, and the whole thing, it's just big grunting mass. And it goes on, and it longer and longer and longer, and neither side is giving an inch. They won't crack. And finally, the sun's the highest. Everybody's sweating. Their sweat's pouring down them. They're exhausted. And Epaminondas blows his horn. And without even thinking about it, because they've been drilled and drilled and drilled, his entire front line shouts with one voice and pushes forward 1 foot. And if you're pushing on something, if your center of balance gets pushed back a little bit, can you push anymore? No, now you're trying to keep your balance. Well, you can't do that when there's 2,000 guys shoving on your line. And they crack the Spartan line, they break them, and kill a bunch of Spartans, and the Spartans go away, and Thebes is liberated, and they're the greatest ever. So Philip comes down to Thebes and says, look, I don't want to attack you guys. You don't want me to attack you guys. Tell you what, let's exchange hostages. So that then we won't attack you and you won't attack us because we have your children and you have our children. It's a good way of doing things. So we'll exchange hostages. One of the hostages that gets exchanged is Philip's son. He exchanges his own son, but he does this because there's a general in Thebes whose name is Epaminondas, who has this cool military technology, and besides, he's a super motivational, like, he's a great guy. So Philip wants his son to study with Epaminondas. That's why he exchanged him as a hostage. Right? Philip's son's name is Alexander. Alexander gets to spend his growing up years being tutored by the greatest Greek general possibly of all time. Then he comes home a strapping young fellow, but his father doesn't want him to just be an uncultured rube. He doesn't want him to be just a military guy. He wants him to be a culture, a well-rounded guy. He wants him to understand the world philosophically, militarily, lots of different ways. In order to do that, he needs a tutor. You got to have a good tutor. Where are you going to get a good tutor? Well, Philip says, who's the smartest man in the world right now? He's probably in Athens, right? Because that's where all the smart guys are. It's Aristotle, smartest guy in the world. Absolutely. But how can you get Aristotle to come and, how do you get Neil deGrasse Tyson to come and teach you if you live in, like, I don't know, Lawrence, Kansas or something? I mean, how are you going to get him to do that? He's not going to do that. He teaches at Harvard. So Philip finds out that Aristotle's grandmother is still alive, and she lives in a little village out on the coast. All of a sudden, it becomes very important for the Macedonian armies to invade this part of Greece, and so they do, and they capture the village. Then Philip sends a letter to Aristotle that says, "Dearest, most esteemed Aristotle, I've heard of your fame. The whole world knows you're the smartest guy. I want you to come and tutor my son. I know I live in Macedon. I can't really pay you very much, but still, he's a great kid. I think you'll love him. You should come and tutor him. Sincerely, Philip II of Macedon. P.S. Grandma Jane says hello and wonders if you're still using her recipe for chicken dumplings." Aristotle sends a letter back and says, "Gee, I'd love to come and tutor your son. Leave my grandma alone." So Philip's like, cool, fine. Leaves grandma alone, and Aristotle comes to be the tutor of Alexander. This is not, I am not making this up, okay? I love Philip, he's great. So yeah, so Philip comes to the boondocks to teach Alexander and finds that actually this kid really is everything his father said that he was. He is intelligent, he is cultured, he is brave, he wants to know about the world. He's thinking way beyond the villages of Macedon or even the villages of Greece. This kid is thinking about conquering the world. He is thinking about conquering the world. Aristotle thinks this kid's a little scary, actually, but he teaches him all the stuff he's supposed to, and he fulfills his contract, and he goes back to, well, okay, fine. He would have conquered the whole world, but he wanted to conquer at least the known world. Aristotle goes home. Alexander is well tutored, got himself a horse. You really need to read the story about Alexander taming Bucephalus because it's crazy awesome. So, yeah, you probably ought to be. He knew he was a threat. He went back to Athens and said, this kid's a threat. And everybody's like, are you kidding? A Macedonian? Right, sure. Can any good thing come from Nazareth? Not a chance. Yeah, well, Alexander takes over after his father Philip dies. There is some insinuation that Alexander may have poisoned Philip. I don't believe it. I do think Alexander's mother did, but I don't think Alexander did it. Anyway, Philip is poisoned and dies. Alexander takes over. All of the villages around Macedon, they all revolt because they're like, hey, Philip's a once in a lifetime king, a once in a 1,000-year king. Now we can revolt, we'll be fine. It's just this teenage kid. He's only like 14. It's going to be fine. They revolt. Alexander turns out to be his father on steroids. So he comes in with his army and is like, hey, you pledged allegiance to me. And they're like, yeah, but your dad's dead. And he's like, yeah, but I'm king now. And they're like, yeah, come and take it. And Alexander is like, while we were talking, I already did. Your village is in flames. Your wives and children have been strung up to die. Oh, have a lovely walk home. We killed all your horses. So then he goes to the next village and they're like, Alexander, king, yes, Alexander, you're the great king. He's really big on this. The first guys to revolt, very bad. Everybody else, hey, we were on your side the whole time, dude. Those other guys, I don't know what's wrong with them. Totally, we're with you all the way. He's really big on this. It is also, yes, horrible. Yes, that's true. About 30, actually, Elizabeth, about 30. Anyway, so he marches down. Thebes revolts, of course. He's like, yay, no Philip. Now we don't have to pay tribute. We don't have to be your friends. We hate you, you stinking Macedonians, neener, neener. And Alexander's like, okay, cool. So he comes down, he marches down. The Thebans are like, we were just kidding. We're all on your side. It's fine. So Alexander marches past. And as soon as he's gone, the Thebans are like, ha, we revolt. And they killed a bunch of the Macedonian guys that were there in the garrison and like, we revolted. Alexander turns right around, goes back to Thebes, and destroys the entire city. And by the entire city, what I mean is, when you go to try to dig up archaeological ruins at Thebes, you can't. Do you know why you can't? Because you can't find any. Alexander basically took an eraser and went, no Thebes. We don't even know where it was now. That's how thoroughly this guy wiped it out. They had the Theban band, the sacred band. Remember, this is the best army in Greece now. They beat the Spartans. Yeah, well. This is the major leagues. This guy, he wipes them out. Burns the city, knocks down the wall, crushes everything, wipes it all out, and starts marching on Athens. A guy named Demosthenes, one of the greatest speakers of all time. You should really read this guy's story, but we don't have time to tell it. Demosthenes makes a couple of speeches. One of them is called the Philippic, where basically he warns that if we don't stop, and he's learned to spell, Little Jones, if we don't stop these Macedonians now, this is going to be big trouble. And the Athenians are like, what are you talking about? These guys are nothing. We don't have to worry about it. Well, then he wipes out Thebes, and the Athenians are like, oh, you mean those Macedonians? Wow. Yes, we should sign a treaty with them. So they do. Athens doesn't want to fight this guy. Nobody wants to fight this guy. One little piece of trivia, and I'm going to end with this because I think this is really interesting. Alexander is now encamped in Athens, eating grapes, being fanned, his feet up on a throne of gold because basically he owns everything in Greece now. He sends an emissary to the Spartans. And the message is, if I were to come after you, I could wipe you off the globe just like I did to the Thebans. And the Spartans send a message back. One word. If. Alexander's message is, if I come after you, I will wipe you off the globe. Then the Spartans send the message back, and it just says, if. That's it. The Spartans are also known as the Laconians, and this is called a laconic answer. I'm not going to say two words when one word will do. Alexander is so impressed by this that he never invades. It's the only city that ever defied Alexander. He basically said, okay, that's bold. That's awesome. We'll leave those guys alone. We don't need them anyway. And marches off to conquer the world. Next time,
No, wait. It's the only city that defied him and didn't get destroyed.
Right, that's right. Yeah, you don't defy Alexander. But they didn't really defy him. They just pointed out that there was a qualifier in his statement. That's it. There's actually an exchange. There are two messages, but I don't remember the first one. That's the second one, which I loved. I just think it's great. And there are other things like this when we get to the Battle of the Bulge and we talk about the Siege of Bastogne. There's another response in there, another exchange of messages. It's just as good. Anyway, but that's not until like April. Anyway, so we got all the way to Alexander the Great taking over Greece. Next time, we will talk about Alexander and his three greatest battles, Issus, Gaugamela, and Granicus. But in real brief, and I may have to do that just with like links and sending you stuff. Because next time we have to get to Rome. As awesome as Alexander the Great is, he's just one guy. Rome is something more. We will talk about democracy. Gaugamela sounds like salmonella. Yeah, well, if you're a Persian, it's worse. We'll talk about democracy and republic, two very important and quite different forms of government. Talk about Athenian democracy and Roman republics. We'll talk about the Punic Wars, the Bellum Punicae, in which there's some unbelievably great stuff. You get Hannibal there, elephants crossing the Alps. Terrific stuff. The Siege of Saguntum. We don't even have time to talk about all this great stuff. Anyway, we'll talk about rise of Latin and Greek. We will talk about, I think we get all the way to the end of the Roman Republic and the rise of Caesar. Hail Caesar. We'll talk about Cato and Stoic philosophy, and oh my gosh, so freaking much stuff. But I think we only do Roman Republic next time. I gotta look at my thing. That will be in 2 weeks. He was probably a tyrant. He was absolutely a tyrant. Kind of, unless you read Shakespeare. Caesar, thrice did Caesar refuse the crown. Ambition should be made of sterner stuff. But Brutus says that Caesar was ambitious, and Brutus is an honorable man. Or is he? Anyway, I love my Julius Caesar. I love it, love it, love it. The Antony speech, not the whole thing. I have a lot of it memorized, but not the whole thing. But it's a great speech. Come on, it's awesome. It's a fabulous speech. It's one of the, people say all the time, oh, brother C, Mr. C, you know everything. I'm like, no, I don't. If I did, I would have that speech memorized. Plus the St. Crispin's Day speech from Henry V, you have to have that memorized because you gotta have that memorized.
Mr. C, I wanted to show you something. Ta-da! I fell out of the tree and broke part of my bone.
Oh,
Sorry.
I thought you were going to tell me that you got super excited at your last concert and you were like running around the stage smashing violins and you broke your arm. But I forgot that's not a part of you.
No, not part of the story.
That's really a guitar thing, really more than
or a mandolin.
Or yeah, I mean, who cares if you smash a mandolin? That's sad. Sorry.
Except for my mom.
Falling out of a tree, and then you did.
Yeah.
Were you way up high?
10 feet up.
That'll do it.
Yeah, it was an interesting day.
Ouch. Never broken my arm. Smashed a banjo, I wouldn't care. I love banjos. I love banjos. They're awesome. They are super twangy. That's why I like them. The next in-person meeting is October the 20th. The 20.
Mr. C, do you know if we're supposed to wear a costume or not there?
Not yet.
I want to know.
Depends on how much it will interfere with other activities.
Yay!
October 23, 2-3. And I wouldn't be surprised if cosplay was encouraged. Really wouldn't be surprised. Oh yeah, hold on a minute. Let me grab my Discord. Where do I even find that? I don't even know where I find that. The only people I'm friends with are my sons. And a server home. I'm killing you. Oh, I'm sorry, not on purpose. No, I don't want that. What time is it again? It will be at 9 a.m. I'm pretty sure we're going to be out Melba Way because I'm pretty sure they will not have lifted the ridiculous COVID restrictions by then. If they have, then maybe we'll do it somewhere else, but probably that's where we're going to be. All right, there we go, there's my thing. I'm told, so one of the schools I teach at is called Liahona. Some of you will know something about Liahona, but one of the schools I teach at is called Liahona, and it's an online on-site, like hybrid. Like I teach a class where there's a bunch of kids in the class, but then also a bunch of kids online. And the online kids apparently have been taking screenshots of the videos and then making memes. And apparently there is a Discord server for Brother C memes. They told me about this the other day. They didn't tell me where it was, and I don't know where it is. So I don't know, I don't know anything about this, but apparently they have video clips and memes and all kinds, because I say really weird stuff in class. I don't know whether y'all noticed that. I never do it in this class. I occasionally say strange things, or I, put on my masks or whatever. Utah County decided that it was going to do a mask mandate, but I read the mandate and they declined to specify what kind of mask. So I decided I could wear whatever kind of mask I wanted. So this is the mask I want to wear. It's very cool at night, has an LED that lights up, and it's also impossible to breathe in, plus talking to people in it is terrible because they can't hear you. And I'm medically exempt. I'm philosophically exempt.
I bought this mask so that I could do the same thing.
Yeah, see, if they didn't want me to wear that, they should have been more specific about what kind of mask was okay. They didn't say.
Yeah, it's their fault.
So I'm aware. So sometimes in class, weird things happen.
I really want to get an old, bird plague mask.
Plague mask. I definitely think I'm doing plague doctor for Halloween, but I think I'm gonna have a lot of company.
Yeah, Mom wants us all to be stormtroopers for Halloween so that we can have masks.
At the moment, I think any mask or any costume. Obviously, masks are fine because we have to wear them, right? So if you ban cosplay, I'm still at least wearing my mist cloak. Yeah, I'm not gonna. No, why would I do that? Wear whatever the freak you want. What if you show up in a thing that I think is a costume, but then I say, hey, I said no costumes. And you're like, what do you mean no costumes? I wear this all the time. Then I'll feel really embarrassed. I don't want that. And how do I know? Some of you are weird enough to wear all sorts of stuff. Who knows what you wear?
Like my cloak.
I'm not going to tell you what to wear. Why would I tell you what to wear? Oh, I see I have notifications for my Discord here. Hold up. There we go. Friends, pending. So many mouse clicks.
Mr. C, so are you going to be banning weapons for the next activity, or are weapons encouraged or not?
Banning weapons? Far more likely to be mandating weapons than banning.
That's good. They won't let me bring weapons to school. So
Yeah, this ain't that kind of school, brother.
that's good.
This is
You
the
like
kind of school where
my
I
math
actually want
literacy?
to learn something. So,
Yeah, unlike any other school I've been to.
sorry to hear that. But I am glad at least I made the cut, even if the bar is low. That's. And we actually talk about this all the time because I teach at a private school, and then I teach at a college that is one of the weirdest colleges ever, and then I teach the Idaho Legion, and everybody's like, "What the what?" That's the Idaho Legion. They're like, "Is that like an official name or something?" I'm like, "Yeah." You haven't heard about that? Wow, that's weird. You've been under a rock or something? Anyway, so the Idaho Legion, and they're like, well, what kind of thing is that? And they're like, is that like a school? I'm like, not very much. They're like, so what do you do? I'm like, well, I teach history. And they're like, so it's like a school. And I'm like, not very much. Not really, no. Oh, nice plague mask, very good. Very good. I like that. Yeah, I think likely. Can I give my Discord one more time? Maybe. I don't know. Hold on. So I teach at Mount Liberty College. It is well, okay. If you like this class, it's this class times 5. Only different kinds of things. So like my father, who teaches there, he teaches the World Civilizations class. So you read the Code of Hammurabi and the Bhagavad Gita and a whole bunch of literature from all over the world, and you talk about how it relates to each other, how it relates to things that are happening now, etc. That's my dad's class. I teach Defense Against the Dark Arts, and yes, there is actually in the college catalog a class called Defense Against the Dark Arts. That's my class. And then I also teach thinking and writing, and maybe, Ryan, I might. I think there's a good chance. But I want to tell everybody else though. That's just us. And I teach basically writing, logic, and rhetoric. So I teach how to write, how to speak, how to weaponize your opinion so that you can hurt other people with it. No, so you can lead other people to the truth with it. That's what I meant to say. So, yes, Plibit, etc. You should have an Alamancy 101 class. Yeah, but I can't teach that because I don't know how to do that. How old do you have to be to get in? We start taking applications when you're 16. Yes, Mr. Schieber, what do you have to say?
Which Schieber?
Whatever.
What do you have to say?
Schieber, Schuber.
Sherbert. I mean, that's what they called me back in 3rd grade when we were getting awards at the end of the year. Is calling me up, Steven Sherbert. Ice cream.
There are not a lot of benefits to being named Jones, but one of them is people don't mispronounce your name. I like shorts. Yes, we are done. We're done with the history, European history part of the lesson. This is the debrief after the history part of the lesson.
So can I bring a battle axe if it's coming with a foe?
Yes.
Okay, that's my question.
I would encourage you to do so.
I'm bringing a sword.
You can leave anytime you want. You can leave in the middle of the class if you want to. That's entirely up to you. If this is not floating your boat, then float your boat someplace else. It's perfectly okay with me. Look, you're an adult. Sometimes you got stuff you got to do. You got to climb a tree and break your arm. Sometimes you got to do stuff like that. If you got to do it during class, then hey, do it during class. I'm not your dad. I'm just the stand-up comedian your dad hired. Is there a writing thing for this week? There will be. See, Evan, I will send out an email as soon as I render this video so that I've got a link for YouTube. I'll send out that and plus a writing assignment and a reading assignment because we have 2 weeks until the next class. The lesson is never done, ever. In a minute, I'm going to click off the Zoom, but the lesson is never done.
Okay.
You're always learning whether you want to or not.
Which means we'll be learning for the rest of our lives?
I hope so. Don't you?
I never thought of it like that.
I never thought of it like that. Or you look at all this stuff I have on my desk and on my floor.
My brother would look at that and say, "You must be sad."
And on my other floor. Yes, what do you think you're here for?
To learn.
Well, that's one of the reasons. I'm here to become more like my Father in heaven. That's what I'm here for, right? So if one of the ways I can do that is by learning all the amazing things that my Father in heaven has done, wouldn't I want to do that?
Yeah.
So would I ever want to stop doing that?
Stop. No.
Just saying. I think my Father in heaven wants me to learn to play video games sometimes. So sometimes I do that.
Yes. My father in heaven wants me to get addicted to a game called Beast One, so I guess I will.
I don't know if he wants you to become addicted to that. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure my Father in heaven wanted me to read Anne of Green Gables, so I did. More than once. And Ender's Game, and so on, and so on, and so on. I think he wanted me to read Brandon Sanderson books, so I did. I haven't read them all because, my gosh. But, you know, I'm working on it.
Okay.
That's all I'm saying. Bye, Elizabeth. You're a wonderful person.
Goodbye.
Tell your dad I said hello. And your mom, I guess, too. So the way I look at it is, and I think I mentioned this to when I was up there, but if I didn't, let me mention it again. The purpose of this class is not to teach European history. The purpose of this class is to use European history to give you a space to become a better person and to encourage and invite and entice you to become a better person. If you learn a ton of European history, but you don't become a better person through this class, then I screwed up. I didn't do the right thing with it. Because it's nice to be able to remember Epaminondas and, you know, battle this and battle that and who wrote what and all. I mean, that's great. All that stuff is lovely. But if it doesn't do anything to make you a better person, why are you learning it?
That's what I said to my mom about certain school subjects.
Right. I mean, personally, I don't think you're going to learn anything you're not at least mildly entertained by, which is why the class is like 50% stand-up comedy. Because if you're not if you're entertained, you'll pay attention. If you pay attention, you might learn something. But if in the middle of class, you have like this sudden stroke of ideas, like, oh, that's cool, I need to go learn about that, and you want to go learn about that, and it's not, you don't stick around here, great, that's fine. I'm not the one who's doing most of the teaching. Ideally, the spirit is the one that's doing most of the teaching. I'm talking about stuff, but I'm just trying to create an atmosphere in which you can become a better person, and I can become a better person too, because if I'm not doing that in this class, why am I teaching it? You know, so anyway, that's sort of that's the mission of the class. That's what it's for.
So I can't take
Yeah.
there's a chat in front of your face that has funny things in it, so I just deleted it.
Oh,
Okay, now I can see you completely.
okay. You do what you feel like you got to do, brother.
Okay.
Do what you feel like you got to do. All right, ladies, gentlemen, my dear friends, I'm going to go do something else. And I will see you in 2 weeks, but I will email you between now and then and give you further instructions. In the meantime, if you have cool things you learn, see, find out about, email me. Hey, Mr. C, did you know blah, blah, blah? Because the chances are pretty good that I didn't, and I would love to. So when you're doing your reading or you're thinking about something or you're reading whatever it is that you're reading or watching or whatever, however you do it, if you run across stuff that you think is awesome, I would love it if you would tell me about it.
Okay.
You have my email address. I will answer your email. I love talking to you.
Does it have to be a specific subject though? Okay. You might get a
How
total
though? No, my gosh. I'm interested in more or less everything.
Yeah, you might get a whole ton of emails about space then. Just maybe.
Yeah, except that. I don't want to know about that. No, I want to know about more or less everything. There's hardly anything in the world that is so insignificant that I don't want to know about it. There are things, but not very many things. All right, ladies and gentlemen, fly, you fools. And I will see you in a couple of weeks.
Goodbye.
Have a good one, Mr. C.
You like that? I got just sneak that in there at the end.
Well, Alex and Christian.
Wait, where's my command screen? Freak.
Abby says hi. To Steve.
Hi.
Abby says hi.
Goodbye.
Peace.
Hello, Alex and Chris.